Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. And before we get started, of course, we got to shout out our friends over at Kalshi for a limited time. Use the code FANARCHBASEBALL at Kalshi.com or the Kalshi app to get 10 when you trade 10. And boy, oh boy, does it feel better doing this show every day after a Mets win. And I know that the previous host, Jake Brown, can relate with that, covering this team every single day over what was a year and a half of bad baseball. And don't get it confused, the Mets are not out of the woods yet, not by any stretch, but it just goes to show you when you talk about the marathon that is a baseball season on a daily basis, that even one win, even one representative good baseball game lifts your spirits and you feel better. And that is, in a way, the beauty of the baseball season, of the 162. That's why people say hope springs eternal, even for teams that are expected to be absolutely awful. You just never know what you're going to get over 6 months of baseball. And we wake up every day to watch this sport be played nearly every day. And no matter how badly things are going, and obviously as Mets fans, no matter how far back you go, you've seen more bad baseball than good over the course of your fandom, over the course of your life. But you wake up every day looking forward to that baseball game, looking forward to that first pitch, and you just hope that your team doesn't let you down. You hope that the team doesn't embarrass you in the process. And like I said, over the course of the season so far here in 2026, there has been more valleys than peaks. We know that. But this was about as good of a game as the Mets have played all season long to this point. And they did it against a good baseball team in the Seattle Mariners, who were winners of 8 in a row, who have hit 20 some odd home runs over that stretch, who, before they faced the Mets, were kind of bouncing back and forth a little bit, searching for their identity, dealing with some injuries of their own, and then they really started to get that momentum rolling. But they are a good team. I've said it all week on the show so far. I'm going to continue to say it here today. That team can pitch. They pitch in the bullpen. They pitch in the rotation. It's been a huge part of their identity. They have a lot of good arms. They have a lot of really talented pitchers with a lot of good stuff. And today, it was no different. But it's a guy in Kirby from upstate New York, by the way. It doesn't fare well against the Mets. It's just one of those things. The quote-unquote hometown team seems to get to him. And that's what the Mets did here today. 7-1 victory, which was really never in doubt for the most part. I know Peralta gives up the home run early, very early, to J.P. Crawford, leading things off in the bottom of the first inning, but he settles right in, and we're going to talk about Peralta plenty coming up in just a little bit. But really, this game was, in every sense of the word, the exact opposite of the game from the night before. The Mets played good defense. The Mets offense was firing on all cylinders. You had some great individual offensive performances from A.J. Ewing and Bo Bichette. We'll talk more about Bichette coming up in a little while as well. It was well pitched throughout. And again, they played solid defense. They played with energy. There was a double steal. They seemed to execute and do everything right. And this is a game that, quite frankly, we have not seen enough of from the 2026 Mets. And it's part of the reason why people can continue to hang on to hope that it's in there, because it is in there. This roster is good enough despite the injuries. On the flip side of things, it's also a part of the reason why the injuries, and although they have piled up for the Mets, don't tell the whole story. It's not like this was a team prior to Lindor going down, prior to Alvarez going down, that was lighting the world on fire. It goes to show you that there is talent on this team, but also the excuses of, well, it's injuries, well, it's this, well, it's that. They don't really exist. And I know on any given day, any team can beat another team. And I'm not trying to say that this victory turns the tide of the entire season for the New York Mets. Let's not get ahead of ourselves there. But the point is that it's in there. This team has Juan Soto. This team has Bo Bichette. Despite the fact that he has not been the Bo Bichette that we thought we were getting, he's still a quality baseball player. I know Marcus Semien has been the source of so much controversy, probably mostly because he was traded for Brandon Nimmo, but he has been a consistent contributor with runners in scoring position, the best on the team. You have a really good backup catcher in Luis Torrens, and don't get it twisted, Luis Torrens is just a backup catcher, but he's pressed into duty, and you sit there and you go, wow, this guy does a lot of things well. He's a baseball player. You've got two young, talented outfielders that you can root for that are baseball players on both sides of things. There's a lot to like, and there's a lot that they can do. This group can do. And if they can just play more games like this over the course of this month in June, as they continue to get healthy, Jorge Polanco might be back as soon as Friday to open up the series in San Diego. Francisco Alvarez might be about a week or so away because that guy heals faster than Wolverine. And at the end of the month, you might get Francisco Lindor back. And it's not just about the month. It's about the quality of opponents that the Mets will be facing this month. Seattle, we already talked about it. Pretty good team. San Diego, they have their own issues, as does Seattle, by the way. San Diego's got their own issues. Some of the issues look like the Mets' issues. They can't score. They have stars that are underperforming. But San Diego is a good team. The Mets have 13 games this month against both Atlanta and Philadelphia. Good teams. It's an opportunity for the Mets to play good baseball against teams that are good. And then you can start to really see how good is this team really. Because it's great to sweep the Marlins and get a little bit of revenge against them, especially with all the history, the Marlins always being a thorn in the Mets side. But the Marlins are a bad baseball team. And so it's hard to measure yourself off of the Marlins. It's great to sweep the Detroit Tigers. But the Detroit Tigers come in without Tarek Skubal. They come in playing as bad as they were, playing like a bad baseball team. Not dissimilar from the Mets, some high expectations, not living up to it, but a team you should be able to handle. And oh, by the way, if the Mets ever did play up to their expectations preseason against the Atlanta Braves and against the Philadelphia Phillies over these 13 games head-to-head in the month of June, well, then you could start to erase some of that deficit that you have put yourself in. So this was a clean game. This was a tidy game. This was a game that us Mets fans have been starved for all season long. And the Mets showed up and showed you what they can do if they come together and just play good baseball. And maybe fire on all cylinders. I wanted to stop short of saying that simply because I'm not even fully sure this is the best this Mets team could play because they are missing some key components. But you know what? This iteration of the Mets, with Jorge Polanco out and Francisco Lindor out and Francisco Alvarez out and Clay Holmes out, maybe this iteration of the Mets, this is them firing on all cylinders. Either way, really good win. You got to feel good about it. And again, you don't throw wins back in Major League Baseball. So I don't want to hear, they should have won 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 would have been better. And like I said on the show yesterday, the Mets need to win more games than they lose from here on out. They don't have another losing streak in them. They had one that totaled 12 games already, and then they had, a second that was 5 or 6. That's more than most teams who expect to be good can endure. So the Mets, they need to win more, and they need to win series. So, you take 2 out of 3 from the Padres coming up, and you get a 500 road trip. In a typical season, that would be wonderful. Going out to the West Coast, splitting the road trip, come back, get right. Right now, the Mets need to be a bit better than that, record-wise. But if they continue to play like this, perhaps they can build off of it, because you also don't want to ask for too much. Oh, just run out to the West Coast real quick, play 6 games in 7 days against 2 good baseball teams on the road and, win out or win, 5 out of 6. That'd be great. But when you say it out loud, it feels like lofty expectations. It feels like too lofty. It feels like an unfair ask. So, good step in the right direction. Let's see if they can build off of it. Because to this point, the Mets' biggest issue this season has been 1 step forward, 1 giant leap back in the other direction. Or 1 step forward, 10 steps back, whatever analogy you prefer. But here, yesterday, they were good enough. And setting the tone, a big part of that was Freddie Peralta. Freddie Peralta was traded for to be the number 1 of the Mets pitching staff. I fall short of saying ace because I am of the belief that you have to achieve ace status. I am of the belief that there are not many aces, true aces in Major League Baseball. And for me, Freddie Peralta would fall short of that distinction. No knock on him. He's an excellent pitcher. Heading into this season, he's probably a top 20 starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. Maybe top 15. Maybe definitely top 25. But he slots in right around the 20 range. And so he's a very good pitcher. He's the number 1 or the ace, with heavy quotes, of the Mets staff. But I don't think he's a true league-wide ace. And so far this season, Freddie Peralta has given you, I think, if you're realistic, about what you expected. He has been Freddie Peralta. Sometimes he's only going to go 5 innings. There's a reason why they call him 5-inning Freddie. He's not going to give you the length that you're looking for. I'm sorry. If you wanted that, you're looking for love in all the wrong places. The biggest issue that Peralta has had is that sometimes this season he hasn't even given you 5 innings. He's thrown too many pitches early, and he's coming out before getting to that 5-inning threshold. You can't have that. That would be one of the biggest critiques on him this season. But in totality, he's been good. He's been solid. Has he been an ace? No. But if you were expecting an ace, a league-wide ace, again, Freddie Peralta is not your guy. But yesterday, Freddie Peralta was everything that the Mets needed. He goes 6 innings, 6 hits, 1 run, 2 walks, 6 Ks. He still threw a lot of pitches. He's always going to do that. But what I loved about Peralta was that he was sitting in the 80s in the 5th inning. I think he was at like 81 pitches with nobody out in the 5th. And you're like, wow. Okay, he's going to give us this 5, but that's going to be it. But then he buckled down, and he had a quick inning, and he was able to go back out there for a 6th and close that inning out too. And you could all just exhale. It's almost like I could hear the collective sigh of relief from Mets fans all over the country. I could almost feel it through the TV from Carlos Mendoza and from the Mets coaching staff and from the Mets players and from the Mets front office. There's just this, we got 6 innings. We've got a fairly rested bullpen now. And we have a big lead. And, doesn't that feel good? Our starting pitcher going 6, giving up just the 1 run. It's something that, again, we have not seen enough of this season. But Freddie Peralta is capable of it. And this Mets team is capable of it. And look, the Mets are in a position now, because of how they've started, that fairly or unfairly, they need a bit more from Freddie Peralta. I get that. Again, if you're looking for him to be an ace, he ain't going to be an ace. But they do need more out of him than what he provided prior to this start. And that might be unfair to ask of a guy who gets traded over here and has never pitched in New York before and is acclimating to a new team and a new city and a new situation. And that's a lot to ask of a guy to just hit the ground running and be really good right away and you have no buffer. But again, that's the players on the field. That's the team. The team let themselves down in that regard. They removed all of their buffer. They removed their buffer as far as the record goes. They removed their buffer for their teammates like Peralta and like Bichette, who we'll talk about coming up in a moment. But if he can give you what he gave the Mets on Wednesday, every time out, or most times out if we're being honest, that's what the Mets need. The Mets need Freddie Peralta to go 6 innings, give up 1 or 2 runs, hand the ball to the bullpen, and call it a game. And that's what he did. And like I said, they haven't got enough of it, but maybe this is the start of it. And if he can give the Mets that over the next however many starts he has in June, he's probably got 4 more or whatever it is, 5 more. That's when you can start to see things turn. So, while I'm not ready to say it's turned, the plans are there. The blueprint is there. Peralta does what he does. Bichette does what he does. Soto is Soto. Ewing and Benj continue to grow. Lindor comes back. All of a sudden, you get that snowball going down the hill. And who knows? Baseball season is here. And on Kalshi, you can trade every single game. Right before I started this recording, I checked out the Kalshi app, and maybe it's because I'm feeling good. And maybe you guys are going to say, I'm naive, and the season's over. And that's a wrap for the New York Mets. I feel like that's going to be some of the comments on this video. But I checked out the Kalshi app, and I saw that if you take the over, if you take over 80 wins for the New York Mets in 2026, which is an uphill climb, but if you are feeling positive, if this win has you galvanized and you can have the same upbeat tempo that my voice has, well, then $100 will get you $213 on the Kalshi app. So think about it. Maybe you're feeling good. Maybe the Mets, for the first time all season, have you feeling good. Maybe you've been burned before. And maybe you want to go in the other direction. Either way, Kalshi's got you covered. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app. Use the promo code FANARCHBASEBALL to get 10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 and older. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Now, I mentioned Bo Bichette a lot to start this show. And now is the time to give Bo Bichette some well-deserved and much needed flowers. Nobody wants to do better. No one wants Bo Bichette to do better than Bo Bichette. No one realizes how poor Bo Bichette has performed more than Bo Bichette. No one wants to live up to that contract more than Bo Bichette. No one wants to show Mets fans what Bo Bichette can do more than Bo Bichette. And similarly to Peralta, he hasn't gotten the grace period. And maybe that's not fair to him. But again, he can thank himself and he can thank the players around him on his team for not being able to pick up the slack. If you're angry with Bo Bichette and you're a Mets fan, I'm not going to tell you not to be. When the Mets needed Bo Bichette most to this point, he's not been there for them. When Soto was out for 2 weeks, Bo Bichette was non-existent. When Francisco Lindor went down, Bo Bichette hasn't picked up the slack. When other people on the offense got hurt, Bo Bichette hasn't picked up the slack. And if that frustrates you, I get it. It frustrates me too. But Bo Bichette's a damn good hitter. He has been over the course of his career. And I don't think at his age, he's 27, I believe. I don't think at 27 years old, 50 games is going to erode what he's done over the course of his career to that point. But he needs a breakout. He desperately needs it. But more than he needs it, as Mets fans, the Mets team needs Bo Bichette to be Bo Bichette. And maybe this was a glimmer of that. Now, we have seen it before. Bichette has had a couple of games that were these really high peaks where you're like, this is the game. If you're a baseball fan, you know that there are those games sometimes you watch, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter, whoever, you're like, that's the one. That's the one that's going to be the slump buster. That's the one that's going to get him going. And Bichette has had some games like that in the past this season already, and it didn't necessarily bear that kind of fruit. But this was a very Bichette-esque game. 4 for 4 with a sacrifice fly, 3 RBI. Hit the ball hard. Hit the ball to all fields. Was even rewarded hitting the ball soft in one of those at-bats and still getting an infield hit. So maybe the baseball gods are turning a bit with Bo Bichette. Because if there's one thing that's been true so far of Bichette's season, despite how bad he has been, all of the under-the-hood numbers show you that he should be better. The barrel rate, the hard hit rate, the exit velocity, the batting average on balls in play. I don't need to pull the exact numbers for you. But if you look at those stats, you're like, how is this guy performing so poorly? Now, do you hit into bad luck? Yeah. Do you have this situation where batting average on balls in play means everything and you need to, it needs to equate to having this monster season? No, of course not. We've seen baseball. 100-mile-an-hour batted balls get caught for outs and 40-mile-an-hour batted balls turn into game-winning hits. We know that. But when you look at the numbers that he's produced, the real tangible numbers, and you look at the numbers under the hood and what he should produce, they're a Grand Canyon apart. So nothing has gone Bo Bichette's way. And hopefully, this is the beginning of turning that around. I will say, I'm a fan of Bo Bichette's game. I was a fan of the Bo Bichette signing. I thought it was smart. I thought it was savvy. I thought on paper, Bo Bichette offers pretty much everything that the Mets were looking for. Hard to strike out, high average hitter, somebody who can bring you that runners in scoring position, clutch gene. And he hasn't been that yet. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's a bust. Or maybe he had a couple months where he was trying to do too much. He was trying to press, trying to have those big moments. Hell, he said it at one point, trying to have his signature Mets moment every time he came up to bat. We've seen it before. As recently as last season, Juan Soto struggled a little bit in his first month. Lindor struggled when he first got here. Beltran struggled when he first got here. Mike Piazza struggled when he first got here. A lot of really talented baseball players struggle when they come to New York. And it's not just the Mets. They struggle across town too. And again, a lot of times, those teams don't lose 12 games in the first month, putting them right behind the eight ball. A lot of times, those teams don't suffer a rash of injuries that says, oh, hey, superstar, go figure this out right now because we need you. Otherwise, this season's going to die right before our very eyes. Nobody else picked up the slack. Nobody else came to Bo Bichette's aid the same way nobody else came to Freddie Peralta's aid. And that sucks. Sucks for them, sucks for the team, sucks for us as fans. But I refuse to think that all of a sudden Freddie Peralta's a bad baseball player. All of a sudden Bo Bichette's a bad baseball player. I think there's plenty of hits in there. This is also a guy who basically didn't drive in a run for like 5 or 6 weeks. And he's still on pace for about 85 RBI on the season. So maybe he gets hot. Maybe at the end of the season, we look up and Bo Bichette knocked in 100 runs. Now, I do understand that Bo Bichette's fate is inherently tied to the Mets team success now. And again, maybe that's unfair, but it is what it is. Because if we look up at the end of September, the beginning of October, and Bo Bichette has 100 RBI, and he's turned his season around, but the Mets missed the playoffs, we are going to be reminded of the fact that when the Mets needed Bo Bichette most, he wasn't there at the beginning of the season. But if today was a jumping off point, if last night's game was a jumping off point, and Bo Bichette from June 3rd on hits like Bo Bichette, and the Mets make the playoffs, nobody's going to care about what happened in April. Nobody's going to care about the ups and downs of April and May. And that's what we got to hope for. And it's not sitting here and just hoping blindly. I want to be clear about that. Bo Bichette is good enough to do that. Will he do it? I guess we'll find out. Unfortunately, with all the good, we have to talk about some of the bad. And I will try not to take too much time on this because this is the third day in a row that I am talking about this same player, kind of along the same lines, none of it positive. 1, I don't want to beat a dead horse. 2, I don't want to seem like I have a personal vendetta. 3, even though this is a daily show and there's a lot of content, I don't want to waste a lot of time on the show talking about the same guy who I think at this point shouldn't even be here, and that is one Mark Vientos. I laced into Mark Vientos on yesterday's show. If you want to go back and watch it, go back. You should. But what I hadn't seen to that point were his post-game comments. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go on Twitter and go on SNY's Twitter account and just check out some of the clips from Mark Vientos after last night's game, where he makes a costly error, hits into a costly double play, and then misplays another ball that opens up the floodgates for Jonah Tong. He said things like giving himself props for the month of May. He said things like he was unlucky in the month of May offensively. He said that he's been pretty good defensively. Never once did Mark Vientos take any onus for anything. Zero accountability the entire time. Now, I am a proponent of faking it until you make it. I think for young players, I think for young celebrities, people who are actors, musicians, whatever, I think sometimes feigning that confidence can be a tool. And you kind of rise to the version of yourself that you put forward. So I think faking it till you make it could be a tool. But with Mark Vientos, it has crossed into delusion. Mark Vientos is buying his own hype. Mark Vientos is getting high on his own supply. And that is a problem. Mark Vientos is carrying himself like he is Juan Soto. And the fact that you have people like Jonah Tong, who is 22 years old, who has 8 big league appearances under his belt, taking more responsibility than Mark Vientos, that's a problem. The fact that you have somebody like Bo Bichette, who, yes, better resume, better player, better pedigree, his dad played in the league, all that stuff, than Mark Vientos, fine. But he just got here. Never played in New York. Signed a massive contract to come here. And the fact that he takes more accountability and he gets it more than Mark Vientos, who was drafted by this organization, who went through media training to be a part of a New York organization, that's a problem. And Bo Bichette is a great one-for-one because you want to use words, if you're Mark Vientos, like unlucky. We already talked about how unlucky Bo Bichette's been. Have you guys heard Bo Bichette utter the words that he himself was unlucky? I haven't heard that. Not from him. If I'm wrong, send me the clip. You have to take accountability. And he hasn't all season. He didn't take it when he ran through the stop sign from his third base coach, and he got thrown out by 200 feet, it felt like. He didn't take it last night when he let his team down in 3 crucial spots. He didn't take it last night when he let down his 22-year-old pitcher. You want to be swaggy V? Maybe don't throw your 22-year-old pitcher under the bus, because that's frankly what he did. And he wants to talk about being unlucky in the month of May. In the month of May, Mark Vientos' slash line was 217, 239, 415 with a 654 OPS. That's not unlucky. That's unplayable. That's about as brutal of a stat line as you could possibly have. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I wasn't doing this show yet, but on Till Mets Do Us Part, I brought it up. In the month of May, Mark Vientos did have a little bit of bad luck. He had some moments where you're like, man, home run got robbed. Wow, off the bat looked like an absolute tank if the wind wasn't blowing in. If he pulled it another 4 feet rather than hitting it to dead center. If this, if that, hit it right on the screws. What if it was a foot higher, got over the second baseman's head? What if it was a foot left? What if? If wishes were fishes, the world would be an ocean. And that is Mark Vientos. That is the story of Mark Vientos. What if? I'm tired of asking what if. I said on the show yesterday, I've been a supporter of his offensive talent, of his ability to be an offensive force in the middle of a lineup. And I still believe in that. I think maybe if Mark Vientos got his head right and at 500 at bats, he'd hit 30 home runs, he'd knock in 90 to 100. That's the kind of offensive player he can be. But I'm not sure if he can ever get there regardless of talent. Because what's in the way right now is entitlement. What's in the way is ego. It's hubris. It's low baseball IQ, and it's selfishness. Mark Vientos challenges more strike calls in uncrucial situations than I've ever seen. Who does that benefit? Mark Vientos. Nobody else. If the Mets are down 2 runs in the 4th inning with 2 outs and nobody on, and he challenges a 1-1 pitch, even if he's right, who's that for? That's not for the Mets. That's for Mark Vientos. The Mets were mired in that brutal losing streak, and he's posting clips on Instagram of him hitting a home run. Tone deaf. I said yesterday it was fitting that Gary Cohen was in the booth with Daniel Murphy after all those years ago calling Daniel Murphy a net negative. Mark Vientos is the definition of a net negative on a baseball team. Matt Harvey got so much flack for wanting to be a superstar, wanting to be like Derek Jeter, wanting to date models, wanting to be at all the fancy restaurants, wanting to be seen by everybody with a camera. That's what everybody said about him, and that's ruined his career. Part of what ruined Matt Harvey's career was thoracic outlet syndrome, a procedure that not a lot of pitchers come back from. Matt Harvey did more in his short time with the Mets to be a star, whether he was obsessed with it or not, than Mark Vientos has ever done. No one can take away Mark Vientos' 2024. It was very good. But Mark Vientos didn't have a Matt Harvey run. Mark Vientos wasn't in the All-Star game, striking out guys on 3 pitches, starting the All-Star game. There was none of that. There was no Linsanity run. Shout out to the Knicks, by the way. There was no Linsanity run for Mark Vientos. So if I ran the Mets, Mark Vientos would have been out after those comments last night. Or 2 days ago now. Mark Vientos would have been out. DFA'd. He's out of options, so you can't send him down. DFA'd, cut, whatever. Or traded for the smallest of returns. A relief pitching prospect in single A. I would have got him off the team so fast. Because it's not one infraction. It's a pattern of behavior. It's a pattern of behavior that goes back, quite frankly, too long. It doesn't seem like it can be coached out of him. It doesn't seem like he cares to be different. And some of that is on the manager. And that's one of my issues with Carlos Mendoza, but we don't have time for that today. Has management failed him? Has his teammates failed him? Has a void, a vacuum of leadership on the Mets failed Mark Vientos? Maybe. But at the end of the day, none of those people can make Mark Vientos be any different. So I think Mark Vientos has failed Mark Vientos. And I don't care. The worry is always this guy's going to go somewhere else and figure it out. And then he's going to haunt the Mets because that's what every ex-Met does anyway. I don't care if he does. I say Mark Vientos needs to go yesterday because I don't think he is a winning player on a team that expects to win. Let him go to Colorado and hit 50 home runs because he's never going to do it here. And from what I've seen about the attitude, forget about the talent. What I've seen about the attitude, I'm not even sure what I said earlier is still true. That if you give him 500 at bats, he'd hit 30 home runs and knock in 90 to 100 every year. Because I don't know if Mark Vientos has the work ethic. And that's sad, because he does have the talent. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers, and we hope that you're a part of it. I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.